The US government has quietly updated its playbook for fighting, and possibly winning, a nuclear war. And the most shocking part, the first strike may already be rehearsed. This isn't about preventing nuclear war anymore. This is about what happens after deterrence fails. And the US has a plan. For decades, we've been told nuclear war means mutual destruction, that no one could survive it. But behind closed doors, military planners have been developing strategies to come out on top if deterrence fails. And one forgotten Cold War protocol still active today could turn a cyber attack into a global nuclear exchange, breaking what we thought we knew. The concept of winning a nuclear war sounds impossible, yet a secret US Air Force doctrine from 2022 states America must possess the ability to fight and win a limited nuclear war. This represents a significant shift in thinking from Cold War-era strategies. While publicly emphasizing deterrence, Pentagon officials have been quietly revolutionizing how nuclear conflicts might be managed. They're not just planning for Armageddon. They're designing scenarios where America emerges as the dominant power after the dust settles. What's truly concerning is how AI has entered the nuclear equation. DARPA's artificial intelligence projects are now deeply integrated into early warning detection systems. Projects like Maven, Overmatch, and the Air Force's Advanced Battle Management System are shortening decision timelines from minutes to seconds. But the most alarming development slipped by with almost no public attention. The Navy's super-fuze upgrade has transformed the entire submarine-launched arsenal. This seemingly minor technical improvement dramatically boosted America's first strike capability. When I first read about the super-fuze, I thought it was just a targeting system upgrade. Then I realized it changed the entire nature of submarine deterrence. These warheads aren't just for second strike retaliation anymore. They can be used to go first. Before this upgrade, only about 20% of submarine-launched missiles could reliably destroy hardened targets like missile silos. Now, essentially 100% of Trident II warheads have this capability. A submarine force once seen purely as a retaliatory deterrent now doubles as a devastating first strike weapon. Recent Rand Corporation war games revealed something equally disturbing. In simulations of a US-China conflict over Taiwan, limited nuclear exchanges occurred in multiple scenarios. Even more concerning, these simulations showed how quickly limited nuclear use spiraled into wider conflict. But how would a nuclear war actually unfold minute by minute? And what if AI makes the wrong call first? The hypothetical war plan. The strategic shift happening behind closed doors is profound. For decades, we relied on mutual assured destruction, the idea that nuclear war means everybody loses. Now, military planners have pivoted toward what they call flexible response and escalation control. This isn't just theoretical. The Pentagon has developed a detailed limited nuclear options playbook that fundamentally changes how America might fight a nuclear war. At the center of this strategy is a weapon most Americans have never heard of, the W-76-2 warhead. These low-yield devices, about 5 kilotons, roughly a third the size of the Hiroshima bomb, have been quietly loaded onto Trident submarines. Why does this matter? Because it gives the president options beyond just apocalypse. Military strategists call it the escalate to de-escalate model, using minimal nuclear force to signal resolve without triggering full-scale annihilation. Imagine this: Russia nukes a NATO base. Instead of wiping out Moscow, the US launches one low-yield warhead against a Russian airfield. It's still a nuke, but just small enough to say, we're not backing down. But we're not going all in either. This represents a fundamental shift in thinking. Instead of nuclear weapons being unusable because they're too devastating, they become tools in a dangerous game of brinkmanship. The W-76-2 was deployed with little public debate. Advocates argued it makes nuclear deterrence more credible by giving realistic options. Critics warn it blurs the line between conventional and nuclear conflict, making nuclear use more thinkable. If you want more deep dives into real-world threats and hidden strategies, hit subscribe. But what happens if that one missile isn't enough? The terrifying answer is next. The win strategy. If limited nuclear use fails to resolve a conflict, the US has a more aggressive option: the counterforce first strike. This isn't about targeting cities, it's about eliminating the enemy's nuclear arsenal before it can be launched. The sequence would be devastating in its precision. Submarine-launched Trident missiles, hiding silently off enemy coasts, would strike first. Their warheads could reach enemy missile silos and command bunkers within just 15 minutes, potentially before leaders could even order a response. Next, stealthy B-21 Raider bombers would hunt mobile launchers, airfields, and leadership compounds. These advanced aircraft, first unveiled in 2022, are designed specifically to penetrate the most sophisticated air defenses with nuclear payloads. Meanwhile, ground-based Minuteman III ICBMs, soon to be replaced by the next-generation Sentinel missiles, would launch in waves. Their purpose: to saturate hardened infrastructure and overwhelm any defensive systems. The goal isn't just destroying weapons, it's decapitating command and control. But America has also invested heavily in ensuring its own leadership survives. The E-4B Doomsday planes and E-6 Takamo aircraft would be airborne during a crisis, serving as flying command centers if Washington is hit. Hardened bunkers like Cheyenne Mountain would shelter key personnel, maintaining continuity of government. For any enemy missiles that survive this onslaught, America has built multiple layers of defense. Ground-based mid-course defense interceptors in Alaska, THAAD batteries, and Aegis-equipped ships would attempt to shoot down incoming warheads, a final line of protection for American cities. If the US can eliminate 90% of an enemy's nukes, does that mean we've won? Not even close. Why winning isn't winning? The uncomfortable truth is that America's adversaries have built their nuclear forces specifically to survive a first strike. No matter how sophisticated US targeting becomes, some enemy weapons will always remain to strike back. Russia maintains a chilling insurance policy most Americans have never heard of: the perimeter system, nicknamed Dead Hand. This semi-automated doomsday machine activates if it detects nuclear blasts and loses contact with Moscow. Once triggered, it can launch all of Russia's remaining missiles automatically, without human input. This means even if US warheads decapitate Russia's leadership and destroy command centers, this system could still trigger all remaining missiles to fire in retaliation. Russian officials have confirmed perimeter remains operational with modern upgrades. China has been quietly building its own nuclear resilience. Their Jin-class submarines patrol the Pacific carrying long-range missiles. On land, road-mobile DF-41 ICBMs can scatter across China's vast interior, making them nearly impossible to track and eliminate. Recently, satellite imagery revealed massive new missile silo fields in western China, some potentially serving as empty decoys to exhaust American warheads in a first strike. This shell game makes a clean US victory virtually impossible. Most concerning are hypersonic weapons that render US defenses obsolete. Russia's avant-garde glide vehicles travel at 27 times the speed of sound while maneuvering unpredictably. The Poseidon nuclear torpedo can travel underwater for thousands of miles to deliver a radioactive tsunami to coastal cities. The US currently has no effective defense against these weapons, even with a near-perfect first strike. Just 10% of Russia's arsenal would reduce the US to ashes. On-screen presenter, psychological anchor. And here's where it gets personal. The president has about 6 minutes to decide how to respond. That's it. 6 minutes to decide the future of the planet. Would you trust anyone to make that call? In those frantic moments, a binder known as the Black Book would be opened, presenting pre-planned nuclear response options. Every choice in that book, as one nuclear expert noted, is essentially a bad decision. There are no good options once the nukes start flying. But even if the missiles stop flying, the real apocalypse may have only just begun. The fallout nobody escapes. The devastation of nuclear war extends far beyond the immediate blast zones. Even if the US wins the nuclear exchange, what follows might make survival impossible. Within 48 hours of a nuclear exchange, America's economy would collapse. Stock markets would shut down indefinitely. Digital banking would fail as electromagnetic pulses fry electronic infrastructure. The government would declare martial law as food distribution systems break down. Water systems would fail within days without electricity. Fuel rationing would begin immediately. Without functioning transportation networks, cities would quickly exhaust their food supplies. The biological aftermath would be even more devastating. Massive firestorms from burning cities would send millions of tons of soot into the upper atmosphere, blocking sunlight worldwide. This nuclear winter would cause global temperatures to plummet and rainfall patterns to collapse. Black rain, precipitation contaminated with radioactive particles, would poison water supplies and agricultural land. The ozone layer would deteriorate, allowing dangerous levels of ultraviolet radiation to reach Earth's surface. A groundbreaking Rutgers University study revealed the most terrifying projection. A full-scale US-Russia nuclear exchange could put 5 billion people, over half the world's population, at risk of starvation within 2 years as global food production collapses. So even if the US wins militarily, it might inherit a planet it can no longer survive on. We talk about blast zones and warheads, but the real killer, it's the sky turning black. For years, that's the part people don't survive. The interconnected global economy means that even countries not targeted by nuclear weapons would face societal collapse. Trade would halt, medical supplies would run out, and conflict over dwindling resources would spread. Where would you go if the bombs dropped tomorrow? Drop your city in the comments, and we might feature the survival odds in a future video. Alliances, accidents, and the unknowns. Even if a nuclear conflict began as a two-nation showdown, it would quickly spread beyond borders. The complex web of nuclear alliances virtually guarantees wider devastation. Most Americans don't realize that US nuclear weapons are already stationed throughout Europe under NATO nuclear sharing agreements. These forward-deployed weapons sit in underground vaults in Turkey, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Italy, making these nations primary targets in any nuclear exchange with Russia. The terrifying reality is that a nuclear war wouldn't remain contained. If the US launched ICBMs at China, those missiles would fly over Russian territory. Russian early warning systems might misidentify them as an attack on Russia, triggering Russian retaliation against the US by mistake. Defense analysts have modeled this exact scenario. The compressed decision time, mere minutes to determine if incoming missiles are headed for Russian targets, creates an almost impossible situation for Russian commanders. The safest choice for them is to assume the worst and launch their own missiles. This domino effect could turn a US-China conflict into a three-way nuclear exchange within minutes, without anyone actually intending it. Even if we only went to war with one country, others would get pulled in. The nuclear map doesn't end at the enemy's border. It spreads like fire. Another grim possibility, submarines from one nation misidentifying the origin of an attack. If Chinese nuclear forces detected US missiles hitting their territory, but couldn't confirm who launched them, they might strike all perceived nuclear powers, including Russia, France, or the UK. The global power vacuum following a nuclear exchange would create chaos beyond imagination. Hundreds of millions of refugees would flee radioactive zones. Disease would spread rapidly as medical infrastructure collapses. Remaining governments might fracture under the pressure. So if the path to victory is paved with global destruction, why does the US still plan for it? Why the US still prepares for a win? Throughout the Cold War, American nuclear strategy evolved dramatically. In the 1950s, the Single Integrated Operational Plan, SIOP, called for an all-out strike on the Soviet Union, Eastern Bloc, and China if war erupted in Europe. A preemptive bid to win World War III by utterly destroying the communist bloc with hundreds of bombs. As Soviet nuclear forces grew, mutual assured destruction became the dominant paradigm. The concept was simple but effective. Any nuclear attack would trigger an equally devastating counterstrike, leaving both attacker and defender in ruins. Yet behind this public doctrine, military planners never stopped developing options. They continuously refined warheads for greater accuracy and built systems to limit damage if war happened, from missile defense attempts to programs for tracking Soviet submarines. The 2022 Nuclear Posture Review represents the latest evolution in this thinking. It emphasizes improving escalation management, the ability to control a conflict that involves limited nuclear use so it doesn't spiral into total Armageddon. But here's the twist. Credible war plans may actually prevent war, because when your enemy knows you're ready for anything, they hesitate. History has shown how close we've come to nuclear catastrophe. During the 1983 Able Archer NATO exercise, Soviet leadership misinterpreted the simulation as preparation for a genuine first strike. Soviet nuclear forces were placed on high alert and the world teetered on the brink of accidental war. The 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis brought us perhaps closest to nuclear exchange. For 13 days, American and Soviet leaders engaged in a dangerous standoff that could have escalated to full-scale nuclear war. At one point, a Soviet submarine commander nearly launched a nuclear torpedo against US ships after losing contact with Moscow. These close calls reinforce what winning actually means in nuclear war. It's not about destroying more of the enemy than they destroy of you. It's about survival, deterrence, and making sure the war never starts in the first place. The elaborate strategies we've described, from first strike capabilities to flexible response options, aren't designed to be used. They're designed to be so terrifying that no adversary would risk testing them. As President Dwight Eisenhower once said, the only way to win World War III is to prevent it. All the nuclear planning, all the warhead upgrades, all the war games, their ultimate purpose is to ensure these weapons remain unused. In January 2022, the United States, Russia, China, Britain, and France jointly reaffirmed that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. This rare moment of unity among nuclear rivals underscores that their weapons are intended only to deter, not to be used for conquest. Yes, the US has a plan to win a nuclear war, but every plan ends in the same place: unimaginable loss. What we've uncovered is both reassuring and deeply troubling. America's nuclear strategists have thought through every scenario, developed cutting-edge technology, and created options for any crisis. The super-fuze upgrades, low-yield warheads, missile defenses, and command bunkers represent the most sophisticated war machine ever built. But the uncomfortable truth remains. Even the most successful nuclear war would devastate human civilization. If 90% of an enemy's arsenal is destroyed, the remaining 10% could still kill tens of millions of Americans. The economic collapse, environmental catastrophe, and global fallout would affect generations to come. This paradox defines nuclear strategy. We build these weapons to ensure they're never used. We develop war plans, hoping they'll gather dust in Pentagon vaults. We rehearse apocalypse to prevent it from happening. The real goal of all these terrifying systems isn't victory, it's prevention. And the second we forget that, we're already losing. That's why treaties matter. That's why arms control matters. That's why keeping communication open with nuclear rivals matters, even when tensions are high. Because the alternative is unthinkable. In the nuclear age, deterrence is the only victory worth pursuing. All the trillions spent on nuclear arms serve one paradoxical goal: to ensure they are never used in combat. As we navigate an increasingly unstable world with rising tensions between nuclear powers, understanding these realities becomes more important than ever. The weapons exist, the plans exist, but with knowledge and vigilance, perhaps we can ensure they remain forever theoretical. If you made it this far, you're the kind of person who thinks deeply about the future. Subscribe so you never miss a topic that matters.